Here in this code sample, we create an object with three properties: ID, name, and average. Over here, we call the observe function that is actually a property in object. There is the object property in Windows, so you can either write window.object or just write object, and window.object as the property observe that holds a reference for an object that represents a function. So that's why the bottom line, we say that observe is a function, and here we specify that we want to observe the changes that take place in the object that its reference is stored within OB. And over here we specify that we want the function, its name is observer, to be invoked whenever change takes place in the OB object. So whenever a change takes place, this function will be invoked, and we shall get printed to the console this line as well as whatever is printed out from this code segment. Well, if we give it a try and check the output, then we can see that the first time the observer function is invoked, we get this printed to the screen. Now, getting back to the code, you can find that we have a call to the deliver change records function. It is actually a function represented by an object that its reference is stored within deliver change records property in the object with a capital O is actually a property in window, the global object, so we can write window.object or just object. It is the same. So here we actually deliver the changes. Here we actually indirectly invoke the function observer that was binded with the object we created over here. So the first time observer function is invoked, as you can see, this is the output we get. Now the first line is the outcome of this simple code. The second line actually goes over the values, changes old, and changes it's a parameter in the observer function we defined. Well, whenever a function is invoked, a function we specified by calling object.observe that we want to be invoked when changes take place, then the passed over is argument is actually a reference for an object, which is actually an array. So we can invoke the for each method on that object, asking for calling this function by iterating all values changes old, and each iteration invoke this function passing over that specific value. And the array, the changes array, actually holds values which are actually objects, and each of one of these objects as the properties type, the type of the change that took place, name, the name associated with that change, and the old value before the change took place. So as you can see, according to the output, the first iteration of this for each function we get printed to the screen, update average 87, and this is because over here this line changed the value of average from 87 to 90. So because we're talking about changing the value of a specific property, we get update printed to the screen. Average is the name of the property, its value was changed, and 87 is the old value, just as expected. The second iteration of for each prints out this line, and that's because there is a second change. The property name, its value is changed from David to David Dan. So the change.type value is update. The change.name is actually name, the name of the property, and the old value is David, that was changed into David Daan. Now over here we have three changes, and again there is a call to the deliver change records function, passing over the reference for the object that represents the function we binded with the object that was created over here. So actually over here in this line we ask again for indirect invocation of the observer function, and this time, as you can see, part of this line coming from here, this for each function, this loop is executed 3 times because there are 3 changes. The first change is changing the ID. So as you can see, sorry, typo. The first change is changing average. So as you can see, update average and the old value 90 that was changed into 92. Then name is changed into David Daan Jr. So we get update name and the old value David Daan. And then there is another change of average. So we get a line saying that the change is update of the type update, and the property its value was changed, its name is average, and 92 is the old value because now we changed it into 90, which is actually the value we had before this series of changes, but that doesn't change a thing in the way the code is executed. So now let's move forward. We have over here 2 changes. So over here when I invoke deliver change records, I expect for an output that includes 2 lines saying about 2 changes that took place. Well, the first change is changing the value of ID, so update ID and the old value 12321. That was changed into this value, and then the second change is of the type delete. So over here I get printed delete. The name of the property, its value was changed, and the old value. Actually, as you can see over here, I delete that name property from the object, so the type of the change is delete. And these 2 changes, as you can see, printed over here to the screen. The print to the screen comes from the observer function that was indirectly invoked when we invoke over here the deliver change records. Now over here we have a change in average, and average is changed into 90, or actually it isn't a change at all because average is already 90. So because average is already 90 over here, when we invoke deliver change records in order to invoke the observer function for all changes that took place in our object, because it isn't really a change, as you can see there isn't any invocation. Now if I change the value over into 100, this is a change. The output now will be different, and as you can see the observer function will be invoked. Change of the type update, and the name of the property its value was changed is average, and the old value is 90. Now when you call the unobserved function, the unobserved actually method, and we can invoke using object.onObserve and specify that we no longer want the connection, the binding between the observer function and the object OB. The outcome of that would be that this invocation won't invoke indirectly the observer function. So now if I refresh, I can expect these 2 lines not to be printed out to the screen, just as expected. Now unobserved function we can use it to unbind, to to destroy the connection between the observer function and the object we want the observer to track. Another thing I want to show is that when you call the observe function, you can specify that you want to track specific events, such as, let's say, delete event only, for example. And now if we execute the code sample, as you can see, we get just this output for the delete change that took place. If I specify that I also want to track update events, then the output will of course include all update events.